It's me, Viv. Hi. Today I wanted to keep up the conversation about afro-pessimism, um, but more so talk about Black liberation theology and what that looks like nowadays, especially with what I would like to think is a spiritual revolution going on, and keeping in mind afro-pessimism and that theory, which I do adhere to. And the word that keeps coming up for me, which is probably going to be the title of the video, is bootstrap spirituality. And this idea, or this theory in the spiritual community, especially, that you find on YouTube, that all you need is to change your thoughts, because your thoughts control your reality, or thoughts lead to emotions, and emotions are energy that attracts either the law of attraction, law of assumption, whatever, that creates your reality. That creates your reality. And as a Black person and a pretty damn spiritual person, I do believe in this. However, I think the issue comes, which is why I wanted to talk about this idea of bootstrap spirituality, kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, specifically in the context of, America, the 21st century, is that first part, right? That your thoughts create your emotions and lead to your reality. And I think a lot of spiritualists do a disservice to, specifically Black spiritualists, do a disservice to Black folks, whether they care or not. When they speak about this idea without understanding the real world implications of that idea in practice for most Black folks, specifically who live in America. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that today. So yeah, you have your nervous system, your thoughts, and I'll say first, not everyone knows that they can change their thoughts. Not everybody knows that thoughts are just suggestions. In fact, even when you know it, it takes practice, it takes time for that to be implemented. But I think the effect of thoughts and their power can't really be focused on if we don't understand the importance of our nervous systems and our subconscious mind. I've seen the power that, healing your nervous system, which is a work in progress, I think, is a lifelong effort. What, and healing your subconscious mind and changing your subconscious beliefs are, but something that I think all of us, specifically Black spiritualists who are invested in the collective liberation of not just Black folks, but everyone, but also specifically Black folks, is that Black folks are specifically, Black Americans specifically, as well as Black folks globally, afro-pessimism, but Black Americans specifically have been forced into conditions, have been forced into conditions that create the perfect, how do I say, situation for a dysregulated nervous system, right? Like, afro-pessimism, yeah, Blackness, yeah. Y'all ever really sat down with the idea that in World War II, what the term ghetto meant during World War II, during the Holocaust, versus what the word and the term ghetto means in America, in Black America? During the Holocaust, the word ghetto was a place, right, that the basically forced Jewish folks into, where they were cramped, right, where they were malnourished, underfed, exposed to diseases, and basically that was where they were before they were then moved to extermination or concentration camps, right? In America, ghetto is an adjective used to describe specifically Black folks and proximity to Blackness, or like the likeness of Blackness. And not only is it an adjective used to describe Black people and anyone who acts Black, but it is also where a good majority of Black folks, right, who experience who are in the lower social economic rung, right, that's where they live. Words have power. If thoughts have power, right, so do words. That's not a coincidence. That we live in the ghetto, and we are therefore then ascribed the, the attribute of being ghetto, right? So if we're going to be honest with ourselves as Black folks, but specifically as Black folks in the spiritual community who genuinely want not just our individual liberation, right? Because it's nice being able to afford X, Y, and Z. It's nice to be able to go this place and that place. But what does it matter? If you ask me, maybe I'm wrong. If your brother can't get there. And if he can't get there because he doesn't realize he's there, and he doesn't realize that he's been purposely put there, that the conditions that keep him there and the conditions of where he is were purposely manufactured, right? People love to talk about spiritual warfare, but what does that really look like? It looks like Black folks being kept in economic conditions, right? In socioeconomic conditions, specifically in the theme of, right, afro-pessimism, the very bottom of the social ladder. We know that there's a racial hierarchy. We know that Black people are at the bottom of it. We know that in every other race, every other non-Black race, the darker you are, the lower you are on that racial hierarchy. We may not say it out loud, but everybody knows this. And we also know that whiteness, and not as a race, but as a political ideology, likes to dip into and out, in and out, in and out, right, of Blackness. But back to what I was saying, right, like, if you are living in what is essentially, for America, this, first world country squalor, right, if there's violence outside of your door every day, if there's creatures that belong outside up in your crib every day, if your school system, right, if you are in everywhere you turn, you are being told, whether it is not consciously, whether you're being told, verbatim, like whether someone's literally telling you, like, you're Black, you'll never amount to anything. Everybody heard the beginning of Biggie's song. I can't remember the title. Or, right, like, whether implicitly or explicitly, you are being told, right, that your life does not matter, that you are at the bottom of the social ring, that nothing you do will ever be, that you are subhuman, right? If you know that you don't know where you can get your next meal from, and neither did your mother, and neither did her mom's, neither did her mom's mom, and her mom's mom was enslaved, right? How are you going to think your way out of your conditions? How are you going to manifest with your mind your way into a Bugatti? Right? Sure, we see it happening, and I think there's, thankfully, right, unfortunately, I have to shout out the influencers because they make it more accessible, but for, a good majority of Black and brown folks, like, the conditions that we live in our nervous system is never at peace. What is it? Is it homeostasis? It's never in homeostasis. Our subconscious mind is never in its homeostasis. So by law, by spiritual law, there's no way for us to manifest the job that's going to get us out the hood, right? On another level, right, like epigenetics, I'm only for my dad, my dad, my grandpa. I'm 5 generations, or I'm the 5th generation from my ancestors in the South, in America, being enslaved. Epigenetics, right? Like, that's science, and I'm never one. I believe that there's a balance, right, between the spiritual and the physical. That is reality. That's encoded in my DNA. At what point am I able to... It takes work. It takes access to resources, to people, to technology, to different ideas, right? To experiences, to believe that I can do X, Y, and Z, right? And then when you have the United States of America, right, who has somehow convinced the entirety of the world, including some Black Americans who are the descendants of the very people that this government has enslaved, that this is the greatest country on the face of the earth, that we are the moral superpower, that we are the global police, that the American dream is accessible to everyone, but in real time you don't see it. When your government is the ultimate narcissist and you are the scapegoat, how are you supposed to think your way, believe your way out of abject poverty? Is it easier, right? And, no one's circumstance is exactly the same. But I feel like, in the spiritual community, we have to be a little more realistic about what I like to call bootstrap spirituality and Black liberation. Black folks have to see and touch and know how powerful we are. And back to that, right? Half of that work has been done spiritually. In the demonization, literally, of ancient, indigenous, African belief systems, African religions. That's a coincidence? That's a coincidence that most Black Americans are Baptists, if nothing else. I might be wrong, but that statistic, right? But are Christians who believe that their power is externalized in the image of a non-Black, fair-skinned, blue-eyed God? Even though I think it's Galatians 2:13, for Christ hath redeemed us of the law, that says, cursed is everyone who hangeth from a tree. Revelations, his hair like wool. But then as soon as we start tapping back into the religions, including Islam, right, that we were practicing before that little ocean voyage that kept us alive, that were disrupting the plantations, right, in the South, it's demonic, it's evil. That's not weird? And then you consistently pose Black liberation, right? Black power as a threat to the status quo. The Black Panther Party, right, is the biggest threat to United States. They meant that. They meant that. They know how and why they meant that. They meant that. I think beyond a return to our power that Black folks need to have, and beyond a good understanding, a realistic and a thorough understanding of what liberation theology means and what the role of the spiritualist, right, is, specifically in the collective liberation of folks, but specifically the collective liberation of Black people. Because until Black liberation happens, nothing else can happen. We also need to be really, really serious and really honest with ourselves about who our oppressors are. The British didn't go into India just to steal spices. They know the chakras. You think it's a coincidence that the highest chakra, the crown chakra, the seat of understanding, of spirituality, of alignment, I think it's a coincidence that the monarchy puts crowns made of stolen jewels from where? Benin and Togo onto that crown? Onto their head? I'm a big believer in divine law, divine righteousness, right? That good will always, must always triumph because it is good. But I think for me, and for Black folks specific globally, because I'm a Pan-Africanist, don't get me wrong, but Black folk in America, we have to be honest about who we are, where we are, and why we're there, who our oppressors are. Why does the system look the way it looks? Because if racism was ended when Obama got elected, I don't even like Obama. I don't even like Obama. I don't like that man. Sorry to this man. That we be Gucci. That's not the case.